Thank you so much for joining me today. The US President Joe Biden announced more sanctions on Russia in his State of Union speech today, on top of earlier sanctions announced. But analysts say that sanctions don't work and only inflict huge pain on ordinary people, not the leaders or the oligarchs they are targeting. So, how effective do you think these sanctions will be in helping end the conflict in Ukraine?
I think that when people are thinking of the purpose of these sanctions and how they've been implemented, it's more as a short-term, immediate attempt to change the behavior of the Russian government, to get them to negotiate or get them to leave Ukraine or whatever. And there are some serious concerns about whether they will be sufficiently effective. My feeling is that they are insufficiently strong to achieve that desired outcome. I think that the sanctions really would have to get into stopping the revenue stream that is going to Russia in return for its energy sales, primarily to countries of the European Union, but also to other countries around the world. I think that as long as Russia can continue to receive those types of payments, and with that in conjunction with some of the foreign reserves that it still has access to, the Russian government will be able to continue to prosecute the war. It will be able to continue to maintain perhaps what might be called a wartime economy. And I don't think it's sufficient to get them to withdraw from the conflict.
US inflation is right now at a 40-year high at a time when many believe the Ukraine conflict will only make it worse. Gasoline prices are especially high. And in Biden's speech, he sought to reassure Americans that he had a plan and said, we're going to be okay. But how serious is this inflation issues?
The inflation issue is quite serious. If you look at the current inflation rate in the United States, I think in January it was approximately 7.5%. And then if you look back historically at a plot of what it's been, you have to go back to really the inflation that started during the Carter administration and then tapered off in the first Reagan administration to find heights that comparable. Now, actually, at that time it was even higher. But as you'll recall, high inflation combined with other economic issues is what made Jimmy Carter a one-term president. It weakened his popularity and made it difficult for him to govern and to get reelected. And so I think it certainly is something for President Biden to be concerned about. And I think that President Biden and his administration were somewhat slow to come to the realization of how significant it was. In his State of the Union speech, he made it quite clear that he's understood that message for a while. And quite frankly, I think that's why, one of the reasons why the Biden administration has been somewhat reluctant to push European countries in the area of energy-related sanctions. Although the United States doesn't depend that heavily on Russian exports, any restriction of Russian exports in Europe or elsewhere is going to drive up the price of fossil fuels around the world, and that's going to cause a greater oil inflation in the United States and add perhaps very dramatically to the overall problem of inflation in the United States.
So Biden praised the country's bipartisan infrastructure law to rebuild America. As he said, it will put the U.S. on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century that they face with the rest of the world, particularly with China. How much potential does this plan have?
I think it has tremendous potential. First, I think there is this bipartisan aspect. The country, the United States, is very divided politically. Of course, it's always had an adversarial system, usually with two prominent parties duking it out with each other. But I think recently it's become particularly acrimonious. Much of the infrastructure spending is on basic things that have little or nothing to do directly with high-tech competition with China and other countries. So these are so-called roads, bridges, canals. There are other aspects of the legislation that will support sort of high-tech infrastructure. And I think that it's in those areas where he's referring to the competition with China and suggesting that we need to do more. We need to spend more. Can it have an impact? Yes, it can if it's sufficiently large commitment. I'm somewhat skeptical that the two political parties will be able to coordinate on a joint response at a sufficiently high level to accomplish that. So I suspect that there will be some modest benefits there, but nothing that is going to change the major dynamics between the United States, China, the EU, and so forth.